They only have, I know some people, I think Elvira, you have only about a half hour, correct? Yeah. Let's take up the discussion from, well, last night and as a whole, especially from what Simon has just raised. Not merely the issue of discrimination, but the issue of creating a great culture in the United States, which African Americans have always been at the center of, actually. What would be needed, and thinking about Sylvia in that regard. You know what to do.
I think as long as we are conscious of who we are in this existence as musicians, as lovers of music, of people who are interested in feeling the love and comfort of the young voice as it is being saved for a long singing career, that we pay attention, as Simon has said, may I say Simon? As Simon has said, to what it is we live in this life, and infuse what it is we love in this life, which is music. That then will broaden the scope of who we are as the human person. It will broaden the desire of who we are as people who love music. We never, as I said yesterday, should reach the point that we no longer consider ourselves a student of the master's work, a student of the work that Sylvia created through her touch of the master's hand. And if we don't pigeonhole ourselves in any place, then the universe will allow us to enhance our knowledge as a human being, enhance our knowledge as a musician, and keep us singing forever. That's how I feel about this.
Well, the lady you just passed the microphone to demonstrated that last night. I said, look, Reese, go ahead, fire. You know, when these concerts are going on, right, there's all kinds of details and things. And so I was behind stage at that point because we had to get the mayor's policy man out with the proclamation and all those kind of things. So I'm behind the stage, and I heard, what? I look, and you know, because there's a monitor. Now you can't really hear on those monitors normally, but that you could hear. No, that was really, it had, I wasn't out there, so I kind of missed it, but Osceola teaches a voice up at Lehman College, and has worked with the Schiller Institute on many things, but you have all sorts of memories and views of Ms. Lee and of this question that we're talking about, so please be.
Well, what really comes to mind right now is, well, I was a very shy girl, from Camden, New Jersey. And when I came to Mrs. Lee at Curtis, she would say to me, honey, look. You know, I was doing Zerbinetta. I worked with that, and of course it was very articulate and just right. She said, honey, you know it now. You got to take down the scaffolding and let it be heard. The building is already up. We got to see it. Take down the scaffolding. You can't be shy and timid. If you got it, flaunt it. And she was the one who said you should go to Europe. And of course, I come from a music family, but I never dreamed of, every time I talk about being the first time on the airplane, every time an airplane went by, I said, oh, that's just something for rich people. It'll never work. But when she started telling me, to take a long story short, I won't make it too long, but you got to go to Europe, you have to do this and that and the other. I knew about opera, but I didn't see black people, and I just didn't associate that with the African American culture in any way. I mean, there was Leontine Price, but ooh, that was great, you know, and then there was Diane Carroll on television. Ooh, that was great. It was fine, but I just never associated and then when she said you got to go to Europe, well, Mrs. Lee wasn't a vocal instructor. She was my coach. She was really my musical mother, my mentor. And I loved her so much, like a family member. She was great. And I was working with another teacher here in New York, and I told her that my coach wanted me to go to Europe. And in humble respect, not to be degrading in any way, but my coach, my teacher was Caucasian, and she said, no, honey, don't go to Germany, because I understand that they have sopranos over there, and they're just considered a dime a dozen, so you just be wasting your money to go. And I told that to Mrs. Lee. She said, well, honey, you don't know until you get over there. I don't want to hear anything about that. So to make a long story short, I went through a few changes, and I did go to Germany to sing Rosina. No, I didn't go there to sing Rosina. That was my aria of presentation for audition. I wanted to do Zerbinetta because that was German. I could sing at 3 o'clock in the morning on my left ear. And I felt so very ready for it because my very first official voice teacher was from Vienna, and she worked with me diligently on that role. So I felt as good as any other person. I thought Strauss had written it for me. And so I wanted to sing it, but no, they were not doing Ariadne in that opera house. They were doing the Barber of Seville. And when I was working with Mrs. Lee, she said, okay, you have sung it very nicely like this person and that person and that person. Now sing it like Osceola. I want you to write your own cadenzas. Don't sing what someone else has sung. You write your own. I said, but I never did it before. She said, so? Okay. So I came up with my own cadenza. She said, she said, yeah. She hit the piano. She said, okay, you sing that, and that's you. That is your signature. So I went to Germany, and I sang my Una Voce Poco Fa, and I wound up with a contract on the spot. Really, I had my return ticket to come back home. I didn't even use it because they wanted me to sing Rosina on their stage, but in German in 2 months. Well, I called home collect. I said, send me some money right away because I can't get a paycheck until I do this performance. And I told Mrs. Lee, of course, I was very much in touch with her. And to make another long story short, for the second aria, they took out what Rossini had written and put in an A vous dire je maman, which was Mozart's theme and variation on Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And they even told the coach that I was working with there to change that around to show my vocal capability, because Germany is really sponsored, their opera houses are sponsored by the German government, and they had to show the people there that I was worth keeping, even though I was right out of college, but I was worth keeping, and so I had to be outstanding. So he had me singing things that the flute should have been playing. He had me singing things that was an octave higher than what was written for the flute, and I ended up getting a 5-minute ovation during my debut night. So that was, in fact, that was when What's Wrong with the Conductor? I mean, he was just leaning back with his arms folded, just standing there. And I said, and so Mrs. Lee brought out of me the woman that you see today. Really, I was very shy. Working with her, I was blessed not to be confronted with the thought of a color thing, but it was an inward thing, a spiritual thing that came out. Because Mrs. Lee was white to me, I said, why is she like that? But getting to know Mrs. Lee and seeing her background, learning her family, and being good friends with Eve and her brother and her family, I felt like I was one of the Lee kids, But it was just a beautiful experience, wonderful relationship to work with Mrs. Lee. And of course, I made my debut at the Met because of Mrs. Lee. She went to James Levine and said, look, you have to hear this girl. And they took me to the List Hall at the Met which is an amphitheater like this. They had 2 pianos. Mrs. Lee was on one piano, and James Levine was on the other piano. And he said, Sylvia, I can't play this without the music. I love the way he talked. I can't play this without the music. She said, well, here, you take this. And he played for me with the music, and she played for me without the music. And I just had a ball bouncing around on that stage. So that's what Mrs. Lee meant to me. I am here. I have a place. It's the people I've met, the religion I've embraced, and everything has all kind of evolved from Sylvia Olden Lee. And it is just a blessing to have her in my thought, in my history, and still a part of my life, because I wouldn't know these wonderful people if it wasn't for Mrs. Lee.
Now, Mr. Hopkins.
I just want to say a word or two about Sylvia that is not so much related to what she's done for all of us, because I remember the King Philip aria. I think Sylvia played that, your mother, for me. But the reason when I was called and asked to participate in this, because I remembered that Sylvia Lee, in that period of time, was the only African-American female coach and musician, because there were very, very few, but she was the only African-American. Do any of you know of an African-American woman during that period of time other than Sylvia Lee? She was unique, not very unique, because we know you can't modify unique. You're either unique or you're not. and Sylvia was absolutely unique, and that's what I would just say, that she broke that barrier that even has helped female women as coaches today that we have in our opera houses. She was a lady of character, of faith, of strength and courage, determination, and she had a beautiful, beautiful heart and a beautiful, beautiful soul.
Now, before Gregory says anything, this is the man without whom what happened last night would not have occurred. Harlem Opera Theater, triple threat. You saw him on the piano. You heard him singing. He conducts, and he's been the backbone of this project. I want people to recognize that and acknowledge it.
And I kind of think that's the way it should have been. Elvira and Osceola, and even Eve, who came out of Mrs. Lee. But none of these were closer to Mrs. Lee than I. I even felt at one point that Eve and Everett resented me because of the relationship that I had with their mom. It wasn't until earlier this year that I got clarity on that when we had, I said to Osceola, I think there's something with Eve out of the relationship I had with their mother. I think maybe she feels as though I got some of the attention that they should have gotten. But one of the things that I think is important, one of the lines that we need to draw for inclusivity with Mrs. Lee, and the kind of thing that she did, was that she created opportunities. And where it looked like there were no opportunities, she opened doors. Where it didn't look like there were doors that could be opened. We haven't talked about the fact that she was responsible for not only her own talent that got her in the door at the Metropolitan. She got there and she made it a point to bring others there. She was single-handedly responsible for Marian Anderson being the first African-American singer at the Metropolitan Opera. I understand the story is that it was supposed to have been Carol Bryce, but that was Mrs. Lee's doing also. And, I single-handedly saw how she created opportunities. When I went to Germany, she gave me a list of people that you call this intendant and this conductor and this stage director, and you stay with this person. And she just made things happen.
Right.
And I think when we sort of segue into this conversation about the National Conservatory, the whole issue is the issue about giving people access
Yes.
and opportunity. And that's where Mrs. Lee broke down the walls. We're very fortunate that we are sitting here in the Lincoln Center. In the New York Philharmonic, we have an African-American, McGill, I think is his name, who is the principal clarinet. But, as African-Americans or polka dot people or striped people, you cannot strive for something if you don't even know that it exists. If you've never heard an opera, how can you be an opera singer? So to that end, our schools are failing us. Our churches are failing us. So something has to happen that gives not only African Americans, but everybody a level playing ground, and that gives us access to those things that make us better as people. That's what Mrs. Lee stood for. That's what the National Conservatory is about. And that's what we're all here talking about, how we can all be better, which brings us closer to being one.
Okay.
Well, there was never any resentment. In fact, it was the exact opposite, because when my mom took sick, he was the one who took care of her. I was thousands of miles away in Los Angeles, my brother in Dallas, and I was on the phone and I was doing things as much as I could over the phone. This is the one who took care of her. He even did her hair. I mean, he did makeup. I mean, he did everything for her. Definitely. And because of your phenomenal voice, which she talked about all the time. And no, I was extremely grateful to you all the time. There's nothing can be said against that. No way. Yeah, Mom had a vision of, she just wanted music. And she was totally dedicated to her profession. But at the same time, really into family. She was an expert housekeeper, immaculate, great cook and baker. She hated to cook, but she could do it. I mean, fantastic. She made so many gourmet meals out of leftovers. I mean, she really knew how. But her thought was so much on people's musicianship, and she admired people, even if they didn't have the greatest voice or unusual voice. She could tell if you put in work, she would promote you. And she wanted to bring out of you, which is what a coach is supposed to do, what you have inside, to give your own signature. So you're not just copycatting somebody else. So she was very, so much into that. She was totally a devoted musician. But she wanted you to do your work. You had to crack the books and know what you were talking about. And I can say that for Elvira. Non-stop obedient student. Osceola, thorough. You made me translate the reviews from Germany. I had string of reviews I had to translate. I was not sure, but I did it. I translated all these Blanche, you did yeah, Blanche, and I remember translating that. Yeah, you did it, and I had a few dinners with you, Simon. Yeah, it was fun. And of course, in New York, I stayed so many times with Mom at your place. Yeah. It was like a extended family. That was great. So I have so much to be grateful for. I know so much music, even though I'm not a musician, I'm a Germanist, but I know so much because of my parents. You heard my dad last night, and he's just been mailed me all his scores. Ooh, I got to figure out what to do with all this. And I'm, of course, I have all my mom's stuff. Well, not all. I gave a lot to Oberlin, her beloved alma mater. And they have an archive just of her things. And the Sylvia Olden Lee Guild in Dover, Delaware, where the Guild is the branch of the National Association of Negro Musicians. They have I send them a number of things also, so that people can really do research and find out more about her. And of course, I'm the proud daughter.
So, Mr. Ray, you toured with her.
Pardon?
I understand you toured with Sylvia.
Yes. I first heard of her when I went to Oberlin Conservatory. The director of the conservatory chose to be her piano teacher, which has a lot of value because his reputation is also at stake. At any rate, I was on my way to Oberlin because I had been in World War II, and I had the GI Bill of Rights, otherwise I wouldn't have been able to get that kind of education. But as soon as I got there, I got in touch with her, as I was told to do, as well as a soprano who was getting a double degree in piano and voice, and that happens to be Carrie Kellogg. She was a double major because her father was a minister, and in order for the family to get food and the things that they needed, she and her two brothers went around singing the trio from Faust, which was then very unusual. I stayed at Oberlin until I graduated, and then I went to Cleveland, Ohio. My wife was teaching in the public school, and I was doing social work, but in the evening I would go to the Caramoo House. And there was a house where people who knew languages would give their time to those of us who were eager to learn languages other than the English language. So I'd go there, and while I was there one evening, I don't remember the evening, I don't certainly remember how this happened, but a man from Vienna came to my dressing room and said, "We're doing Amal and the Night Visitors in Vienna, and I'd like to have you as my king, Balthazar." So I went home, I talked over this with my wife, and she said, "Well, honey, if we're going to do something or take a chance, let's do it now when we're young, because you can always go back and pick up the pieces." So I got on the boat because flying was too expensive. I landed in Vienna, and we started rehearsals. That went on for a while, and all during rehearsals, when we had breaks, people would come in. I didn't know who they were. I guess they were scouts or what, and they'd say, "What else do you do?" And I said, "Well, I've studied German, French, and Italian at my conservatory, and I sing all the operas in those languages." So they said, after a certain period of time, "We'd like for you to stay over here as long as you can." I talked to my wife, and I told her, "Store the furniture and get on a boat." And so I had already had enough money to take care of 6 months of living in Germany, because Germany has more opera houses than any other country in the world. So they came over. I had my first performance in Frankfurt with Scholti, which was very important at that time. And I had other things in mind, and would talk over these things with my agent, because I knew that I wouldn't have the opportunities in America that had already been telegraphed to me as 12 or 13 years old. And so I did Amonastro, where I didn't need any makeup. but, but then I told to my agent, and I said, what do the Germans do if they're going to do Othello? And they said, they put on makeup. I said, what do they do if they're going to do Puccini's Madame Butterfly? They put on makeup. I said, what about me? Because each time I would audition, they would say, das ist aber eine wunderbare Stimme, aber schwarz. This was a revelation. So eventually the proprietors, the opera managers decided, let's take a chance. So they put me as Figaro, and that worked well. Except that people would leave the theater, and I had somebody who would clean off all of this stuff on my face, and I would leave to go eat or whatever we were going to do after the performance. But other people would be waiting to see, I guess, a white person come out of. And I was long gone. and they would talk to the partner who was in charge of the backstage of the theater. Beyond that, I did Walter Felsenstein, who was the opera director at East Berlin, when there was an East and a West Berlin. He said, I want you to do Oberon, but I don't think Oberon has to be countertenor. I think he should be baritone, because he's in charge of the forest, and I like the timbre of your voice. So he wrote to the composer, Benjamin Britten, and said, can I take this down an octave? And Benjamin Britten said yes. I think he would have said no matter what, because he knew the reputation of Felsenstein. So I got into the cast, and they were swinging me overhead on ropes, and I said, do you take insurance out? I said, because what should happen if this ropes and things that I was attached to would break? So I got very strong insurance. Now, if Sylvia, meanwhile, was coming and going, because Eve, her brother, and Sylvia and their father lived in München, which was maybe an hour from the city my family was living in, and that's Stuttgart. They put a group together to do America Häuser, America houses for good American propaganda. So they said, Sylvia, would you accompany them? Well, she knew me and I knew her. Both of us graduated from the same conservatory. So we made this tour: Russia, France, Belgium, and Copenhagen. And I also did with her husband the same thing. She was not only a wonderful accompanist, but she was a wonderful person to travel with, because she sort of acted like, well, do this, do that. And every time she made a suggestion, it made it easier for you when you had something to do and had a slight problem as to, well, which way do I go? Because, you know, singers sometimes sort of get a little crazy. And they ask or want to do the almost impossible. And she said, no. And she always did that monitoring, which was wonderful. But we did a lot of traveling together. Then in '82, the Peabody Conservatory in Baltimore asked me to come and teach there, a very conservative conservatory. And I stayed there for 10 years, and then I retired, and Howard University said, I'd like for you to come and be in charge of our music department, our voice department. So immediately I thought of Sylvia, so I brought her there, and another lady who's the daughter of Charles Wesley, and Charlotte Holloman, was also teaching in Washington and had a wonderful group of singers. I brought both of them, and that really meant something to Howard. But lastly, I just want to say that she was one of the grandest ladies I've ever met. She knew what to say and how to say it. And not many people have that talent. They'll insult you and not meaning to. But she never did that. Everything was very well thought out, very spontaneous, and I love her very much.
Thank you. That's excellent. Stay right there. Stay there. So I want to, we see what this, okay, I want to use the microphone, the handheld mic, because there's various people in the audience that may have questions or comments. I saw that Carmela left. I know she had something. And Elvira had to leave us, so everybody should just know we would thank her for being here, of course. Oh, you are? Oh, okay, fine. I thought you had left us. Oh, you just changed your situation. I get it. All right, so if anybody has a question or a comment, just, well, you should keep it, actually, because people out there. Is anybody there? Do we have a second microphone that we can run?
There's a microphone there by the piano.
Oh, okay, that one is live over there, where Alex is.
That one's 3 on.
Okay. All right, anybody have anything? There's a lady back here. Oh, we don't even need a microphone for her. Yeah, we can hear her.
Oh, well, I don't want to be incriminated. Good afternoon. My name is Carolyn Sue Braun. I'm a mezzo-soprano and have worked with Gregory Hopkins. Hi, Gregory. Mr. Estes, you spoke about giving back, and I just wanted to, I'm not sure I have this right, but I heard that when the Metropolitan Opera did the production of Porgy and Bess, you insisted that there be a significant number of African-American singers that were hired to do other things. And I think that was such a wonderful action on your part, which is an example of your giving back. The other thing that I've understood that you have done in Iowa is scholarships for South African singers. Was Pretty Yende a product of that? Yes.
Well, I think that you're basically correct what you said. I just want to say one thing about when we did the Porgy and Bess. Joan Indian was the artistic director, and this is not to put her down, but when she asked me to do Porgy, I asked her, were they going to hire opera singers? Were they going to do it as an opera, the way that Gershwin had written it, or is it going to be a Broadway musical? And she said, well, of course we're going to hire all opera singers. I said, really, all opera singers? She said, yes. She didn't realize I was setting her up. But I said, okay, then if you're going to say they're going to be all opera singers, I said, I really want you to engage operas, the singers who are singing in Porgy and Bess to sing other roles in the opera house. And she said, well, those are our intentions. I said, it cannot be intentions, it has to be a reality. You said they're going to all be opera voices. I take you at your word. And so they did hire a few. As far as the African situation, I founded a school in South Africa many years ago. I'd sung many times for Nelson Mandela. But what I want to mention the most right now, because it's something that's still going on, I sang for the grand finale concert of the World Soccer in Johannesburg in 2010, and Bocelli sang with me. We were the two main artists. The moderator, who was a South African woman, said that 90% of all the malaria deaths in the world are in sub-Saharan Africa. Every 30 seconds, a child 5 years of age and under dies from a malaria mosquito bite, and 1 million children are dying every year. I didn't know this because we eradicated malaria in the United States in 1951-52. Anyhow, God laid it on my heart to try to help save these children's lives. So I've been working with United Nations Foundation. I have an agreement signed with them that I've been raising money. And so at the end of this month, I will have raised $500,000 to save these children's lives in Africa. And I started on this project in 2013. There were still 1 million children dying in Africa. Now there's only 400,000, which is still an astronomical number. And I brought a lot of African students, 41, to the state of Iowa to go to 15 different high schools, public and private, a number of years ago. Some of them remained in the States and got college degrees, et cetera. But I just wanted to help those children in Africa, and I'm still helping them. So that's that.
Can you get?
And I sang with the choir last night. I need some context, so I asked Diane to allow me to read this. Diane read a letter to us from Dr. Eugene Simpson, who is the Professor Emeritus of Voice and Choral Literature at Rowan, University of New Jersey, last night before we walked down the steps to get seated on the stage, and I'll just read the part that I have a question about, or I would like some context about, particularly from you, Osceola. Whatever context you may have or can contribute to this. So Dr. Simpson said, I am especially heartened by the devotion of your chorus to the performance and preservation of the African American spiritual, a form considered by many ethnomusicologists to be the only authentic American contribution to music. Does anybody have any context to, thoughts about that? Since I can't ask him personally about that.
Anybody want to take that up, or I should take it up? Or okay.
It's interesting that you said Afro-American, because that's a very specific thought right there, African-American. I was very surprised to find out that there was such a thing called white spirituals, and a friend sang that for me, and I was very impressed with what she was singing. That was one of the things that Mrs. Lee was very interested in, about the preservation of African American music, and it is a subject that really should be preserved the same way other cultural music is preserved, and it's up to us to keep it going for the next generation. As far as contact is concerned, are you familiar with the NAM, National Association of Negro Musicians? Okay, well that could be a start right there, and we have branches all throughout the country. I'm president. Yes, right here in New York. In fact, he's a member of my branch. So it's the Thomas Music. Yeah, I have another member here too, right? So it's called the Thomas Music Study Club. But Mrs. Lee started a branch, the Sylvia Olden Lee Guild. That's another branch of NAM. But you're in New Jersey, and I think he's. Okay, well, if you want to talk to me afterwards, I'll talk to you about it, okay?
Great. I think we only have time for like 2 questions.
I would like to address
sure.
her issue. Just,
okay, sure.
I'll try to be very brief and very succinct. I think one of the things that Dr. Simpson is referring to is the fact that all music that is intrinsically American roots itself back to the spiritual. Now, I guess the question is, why do we say that? Mm-hmm. And we say that because when Europeans came here, they brought with them the music of their culture. Africans came here, and they brought with them the music and the rhythm of their culture. The symbiosis, the combination of those two elements that happened specifically 300 or so years ago on this soil is the music that birthed everything that we now call American music, not just African American music, American music. Because there was no American music prior to that. There was European music, and it came over on the boats. There was African American music, it came over on the boats, but on a lower level. When they got here and they pollinated together, American music was born. So you can't talk about American music without talking about African American music, unless you want to really be American and say it's Indian. Native American music. That would be the truly American music.
Good. Fine, but wait, let me just say something to everybody. We're going to have to vacate the room, okay, after about 5 minutes. That's fine, we can talk outside, it's not a problem, but just understand that. Sure.
Well, I usually don't speak. I'm a dramatic soprano. I'm Beverly Vanessa Hill, and this is Beverly Vanessa Hill. Sitting in the audience, the concert last night had your stamp, Gregory Hopkins, all over it. It reminded me of Flushing Town Hall when we sang that. I am so proud of you. Here's what, I studied with Sylvia Lee, very briefly. So I think you grab what you can. I've had to grab what I could from everyone. And I have to say, Mr. Estes, who really doesn't remember, but I was with Westminster Choir College, singing in the choir. And Mr. Estes was singing the Beethoven Ninth. We were either at Carnegie or we were at Lincoln Center. And I would just follow him around and look and think. And so, I mean, he didn't know, but I was just, a student looking. And so I grabbed the courage and I said, Mr. Estes, can I get a lesson with you? He said, well, I'm sure, of course. So I met him in New York. And we went to his studio, and I mean, I don't know how impressive I was at 25, or however I was. I think I was younger than that. But he said to me this, and he's been a teacher in my mind and in my heart. He said to me this: sing to express, not to impress. I cannot tell you, I've sung with the Radio Symphony Orchestra. I did the last live recording with Maestro Anton Guadagno. I just recently did the Poulenc Gloria with the Canterbury Choral Society. I was reviewed in the art form as I've been reviewed as one of the greatest singers in the world. And I remain a little bit quiet, and I'm about to go to put things more out there of what I've done and what I do. But in my heart, you should know that the things that we say to one another have great meaning, and that one phrase that you may never has had a huge impact on me. And Gregory, Mrs. Lee would say to me all the time, I wish that boy would stop doing all this choir work and all this playing in the choir. I wish he would just sing. And she would complain that with me all the time. But when I saw you last night, and Miss Osceola, now I've heard about you since growing up. When you sang that piece last night, you knocked it so completely out of the ballgame. And here's what you did. You showed us this is true artistry. You showed us that the concentration, the work, the dissemination, as Ms. Altamora said, the solfege, the clarity of what you did, all anyone could do. You could have been speaking in German, Hebrew, Yiddish, no matter what. You spoke to the heart because you did the work. And all the work that you've done your whole life came right there on that stage. And Gregory, everything that you've been through, you were meant to do what you did last night, because that was your fingerprint.
You played for me too.
Thank you.
Right. That one over there.
Thank you so much. Just Yes, Gail Robinson Otero here. Sylvia Lee, what has not been said, we've talked about her geniusness, how she works with people, but her accessibility, I think, was tremendous to me, and how so many of us who could not afford her had access to her. So I'm wondering what we individually, I know everybody wants to do a national movement, but at this point, what can we individually do to pass this on to the next generation? How accessible can we be? How inclusive can we be when we talk about culture? Oh, child, this child doesn't have any culture. And I say, whose culture are you talking about? So all of us, we have culture, whether it's European, and let us know about each other's culture and study each culture in the same way, with the same depth, the same passion, and that can pass things on. That can pass this love that Sylvia has. And as we pass it on, I just say I love Sylvia because she would give you not all of her knowledge at one time, but she knew timing, what you could handle at that time. So when we pass on not everything we know, but what the person can handle. And I think that will help the next generation have this same love and passion that Sylvia Lee passed on.
All right, great.
In reference to the woman who spoke about the spiritual quote, in addition to being a concert pianist, I'm an associate music professor. I taught black music history. There's a wonderful book called The Music of Black Americans by Eileen Southern. And she gives the whole history of the spirituals in the book, and I recommend that.
Okay, so I'm going to take this over because we have to now vacate. But in answer to what was raised by Gail, here's what needs to happen, because Gregory put it right there. We talked about the idea of a movement. People say, well, movement is a big deal. Well, is it? I mean, how do you think you got here? You got here through a movement. This is something that the Schiller Institute has been doing. I particularly have been doing it for a long time. Gregory's known me for 25 years from doing it. Sylvia and we worked from 1993 on this. What do we have to do right now? Step one, we need the chorus to grow from its 220-person size to 500 people by December, number one. Number two, we're going to have a summer school for young people starting on July 10th, I believe. And you can see Lin Yen about that outside. That's for young people who want to come in, and we're teaching them everything from voice placement to this idea of the tuning frequency, the proper tuning, and so on. Step three, probably we will find ourselves once again this year doing something at the time of 9/11, and it will probably be at St. Bartholomew's Church. You can find out about that outside. Step four, Gregory Hopkins Church has now become the headquarters of what we're calling the Second Harlem Renaissance. Now, he wasn't consulted on that. He wasn't consulted on that, but that's what's going to happen. There are many things going on up in Harlem, and we intend to use the occasion of those things, some of which are not so good, and flip them over and get a situation where the kind of concentration you saw on that stage last night and you see on this stage today, and erudition that you see, is made available to the greater, not merely Harlem community, though it's going to radiate there, but New York City as a whole. You need a movement in which people understand that if you want to deal with the problems of banality and crassness and so on, and I think you all know what I'm referring to, if you want to deal with that in life, really, you have to transcend it. And it has to be a situation in which you create a great and noble capability in the human mind. It's already in that mind, but you have to educate it. And Sylvia was excellent at that. She believed in that, and she radiated it, and it was not academic. That's the most important thing about it. It was real. It was rooted, it was viscerally real, actually, if you let it be. And so I want to thank everybody for being here today, being part of this, and I strongly urge you to go out and do likewise. Join this movement, become part of it. And let's get immediately this up on Facebook, Instagram, social media, get it out to your friends, tell them your responses, get them in touch with us. We certainly accept contributions, financial and otherwise, that can also help. But seriously, let's make this the movement it's supposed to be. Last night was the first day of what should be a 1-year recognition of what Sylvia did by doing what she did. So again, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank everybody that's up here on this stage and thank all the performers from last night. And you will see us again. Thank you, man. Thank you.